have constantly saw coming up would be vulnerability, or the potential for loss when it comes to disasters. I feel like this is one of the biggest terms that was brought up throughout the readings and the articles that we read this week, because when you're going through a disaster, the vulnerability of being in that disaster and not knowing if you're going to come back to your home or come back to your job is a huge vulnerability, and not knowing how bad the disaster is going to impact your area that you live in or the surrounding areas that could affect the way you live when you move back into your house. I didn't even know that the domestic violence rates were a huge factor after natural disasters happened. After reading the articles, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because of the PTSD, the loss of control, the impact of losing your job, your home, the way of life that you were used to living, and having to make up for all the loss that you just went through. Kind of makes sense in a way, but it's also extremely sad that these women have to go through that. Another thing that when reading, I noticed that it said that children, elderly, and disabled would have a hard time with the disaster and were the ones affected the most, which it makes complete sense, because the elderly, especially if they're in nursing homes or they live by themselves and don't have family close to them, they have a really hard time getting out of their home, getting evacuated. So then most of the time they get stuck and left in their home if they're living on their own. For the ones living in the nursing homes, they will have to get on a bus and be transported out. And for those who are on oxygen and on a lot of medications and shots, that's a lot to put them through, especially if some of them are on bed rest. For children and disabled, children, it's a huge impact, it's a huge blow. Their entire world's being shifted upside down and they're having a hard time coping with it. And with the disabled, once again, if they're living on their own or they have a hard time getting around, then it's going to be even harder for them, especially if the floodwaters start coming around them, or they can't breathe from the air around them becoming toxic from the fumes from a wildfire or something. My question to you would be, what if you were an emergency response team, what would be your plan to protect those who are high risk, which would be the people who are high risk for domestic violence, children, elderly, and also the disabled? Hope y'all are having a good semester so far.